The general's voice, a booming instrument of authority, echoed across the desolate desert range. "A 4-mile shot? It's not a target, soldier," he sneered, pointing to a flickering speck on a distant monitor. "It's a hallucination, a physically impossible shot." He turned to the gathered officers, his audience of powerful, uniformed men, and let out a short, dismissive laugh that was meant to be contagious. Standing before her cold steel rifle, her hands steady, her eyes locked on a point only she could truly see, the young sniper did not flinch. Her silence was a fortress. His laughter, a wasted effort against a wall that had already stood for a lifetime. The general called her shot physically impossible, then froze. When the 4-mile target vaporized the high desert air, thin and dry, whipped at her face, stinging her cheeks with grit. But she didn't feel it. Her world had long ago shrunk to the feel of the rough polymer stock against her jaw, the barely perceptible click of the windage knob as she made her final infinitesimal adjustment, and the impossible distance between her and a target 4 miles away. To her left, General Thorne continued his performance, his voice a relentless drumbeat of condescension. He was a man who had built his entire career on loud declarations and undeniable authority. For him, this was an easy victory, a test of new experimental equipment, but one he had already declared a failure before she'd even laid a finger on the trigger. "You're a skilled marksman," he had said, using the words as a form of dismissal. "But physics is a battlefield even you can't win. This isn't a hero story, it's a display of technical limitations." His words hung in the air, a public verdict, and the crowd of high-ranking officers shifted uncomfortably, their silence a complicit agreement. Some cast her pitying glances. Others looked away, unwilling to witness a public shaming they could do nothing to stop. Anya closed her eyes for a moment, the worn leather of her scope cover a familiar, grounding texture. The general saw a young soldier. She saw a lifetime of cold mornings and quiet patience. Her mentor, old man Sergei, a grizzled veteran who lived in the snow-choked passes of her homeland, had told her once, "The truest measure of a sniper is not the distance, but the certainty." He had taught her to feel the air on her skin, to hear the whisper of the wind as if it were a voice, to see the world not as it appeared, but as 1,000 interconnected variables, all waiting to be understood. He taught her that a shot was not just a bullet's journey, but an act of will, a fusion of intention and reality. She carried the weight of that lesson with her every single day. She had learned it in the biting cold of the mountains, where every breath was a calculation and a single mistake could cost a life. She had learned it most profoundly the day a mortar round took her friend, Lieutenant Kasimov. He had been a man of boisterous laughter and infectious optimism, and his death left a silence that never healed. His last words had been a shouted warning, a sacrifice to save the men behind him. That memory was a permanent weight, a constant reminder that her craft was not about glory, but about the solemn duty to protect the life that breathed just behind her. Her silence was not a sign of fear, but of a focus born from a burden too heavy for words. The general's voice, sharper this time, cut through her memories. "Any time now, Private. We have other, more practical demonstrations to attend to." His tone was now an open mockery, laced with an impatience that sought to break her focus. "The sun's getting low." A low, derisive chuckle rippled through the crowd. This was not about a shot. It was about the humiliation of a junior soldier who dared to stand as an equal. Thorne wanted her to fail, and he wanted it to be spectacular. Anya ignored it all. She saw the thermal shimmer of the air, the slight curve of the earth, the very rotation of the planet working against her. She heard the distant, barely audible hum of a new drone, a factor the general had not accounted for in his calculations. With a deep, deliberate breath, she exhaled slowly, letting the world fall away, her mind becoming a silent, empty vessel. There was only the moment, the rifle, and the shot. The trigger pull was a gentle single pressure, a thought more than a movement. There was no click, no loud bang, just a quiet, decisive release that felt like a falling grain of sand in a vast desert. For a moment, nothing happened. The sound of the shot, muted by the incredible distance, took a full 18 seconds to reach the observers. It was a distant, unremarkable pop in the vastness of the range. General Thorne smiled, a smug expression of total vindication already forming on his face. He began to turn, his victory speech prepared, ready to move on. He had already won. Then, an officer at the monitor gave a sudden, sharp gasp. Another's eyes went wide, and his hand flew to his mouth. The image on the screen, a pixelated rectangle with a tiny target at its center, simply vanished in a cloud of dust. The flag marker, a tiny symbol of its existence, blinked to a non-existent point in the dirt. The shot had been so impossibly precise that the bullet had not just struck the target, it had traveled with such surgical exactitude that the force of its impact had vaporized the tiny sensor, erasing it from existence entirely. The crowd fell into a stunned, absolute silence. The only sound was the distant drone and the faint, almost unheard whisper of the wind. General Thorne froze. The sneer on his face was replaced by a look of bewildered, utter shock. He said nothing. He could not. His science had been wrong. His authority had been based on an ignorance he had not known he possessed. His face went pale, his mouth slightly ajar as if to begin a sentence, but no words came. The silence he had so desperately sought to break with his laughter had now descended upon him, an immense and crushing weight. Anya, her task complete, simply broke her posture and began to calmly pack her rifle away. She did not look at the general. She did not look at the crowd. Her work was its own reward. A senior officer, a man with a chest full of ribbons who had remained quiet throughout the entire ordeal, stepped forward. He didn't speak, but he gave her a long, respectful nod, a silent apology for the indignity she had suffered. It was a moment of public validation more profound than any medal. As she walked away, the silent officers parted for her, no longer a complicit crowd, but a group of men who had just witnessed an impossible act. Her victory was not in a shouted retort or a boastful celebration, but in the overwhelming, undeniable truth of her work. True power is not in the noise you make, but in the quiet dignity that precedes you, and the honor that speaks for itself. Her final lesson was that a single, precise act, performed in silence, can speak louder than 1,000 words of doubt.